Most people go for good things and avoid bad things. But what is good and bad? They are substitute words for what you like and what you don't like. When enough people like something, it becomes conventionally good, and the word takes on a stronger meaning. It may or may not be imposed by a higher power, a god or gods as well. However, the question I want to ask is, what is good without the bad? Imagine if everybody in the world had an expensive car like a Lamborghini. Most of us who cannot afford it now would say it's good to have one. Nobody would care anymore if everyone had one. Some may still say it's good that we have it because we did not have it before, or because we might lose it in the future. But if we do not think about that comparison, we cannot say if having a Lambo is good or bad. We may still appreciate it for the utility of transporting us, but again we are making the comparison with not having a car at all. So for judging the good, there is always a comparison with the bad. Something bad is a prerequisite for something good, and vice versa. There is always something we like more than another thing. Our whole world is driven by this contrast. A warm drink on a cold freezing day, a cold one on a hot day, a dish of nourishing food after a fast, meeting another man or woman after wandering alone in a desert, having some alone time after a day spent in a crowd, success in business after a period of stagnation, intercourse after a time of abstinence, getting married and having a child after being single and childless. These are the things we live for, but we cannot have them without the bad starting point. If we changed all bad things to good, we then either redefine the old good as the new bad and start improving it again, or if there is no improvement possible, life gets extremely boring. Eventually, people, consciously or not, let their good work get destroyed so that they can restart the process and get pleasure from going from bad to good again. This ties in with the cycles of rising and falling civilizations. Yet, for some reason, there are movements in this world that say or imply that we should have only good things in general. For example, the New Age idea of allowing only positivity in your life, or some religious rhetoric about banishing all evil. Most commonly, though, we see a mixture of recognizing the need for this contrast in some things and saying it is not necessary in others. For example, religious organizations and governments will readily admit that work is a virtue, that is, efforts to go from bad to good. However, certain things are condemned totally, like murder, stealing, greed, infidelity, and others. Although not all religious organizations, but certainly most governments, act with the ideal of making murder and stealing practically impossible. Yet it is a fact that without the possibility of murder, there is no concept of being a conscious non-murderer, someone who has motivation and capability to kill someone, but is able to overcome this urge. In the same way, without the possibility of stealing, you do not have the non-thief, who is tempted but can overcome this urge. Regarding greed, there is no satisfaction with what you have without the possibility of being greedy and getting more than you need as an opposite. And there is no true fidelity without it being possible to be unfaithful. If, let's say, a strong man, who could otherwise kill a weaker man, has an armed enforcer robot put by his side 24/7 who could disable him in a millisecond, he does not have even the possibility of committing murder, and no self-agency to decide on it. Therefore, as well as taking away his possibility to do a bad thing, you are also taking away the potential to be good. If the man still has an urge to do it, this intention might come out in other ways which are not strictly controlled. For example, being dishonest and manipulating other people to their disadvantage, to satisfy the urge of having some sort of control over another, which would otherwise be the possibility of murdering them with force. While it will depend on the individual, it may be better to allow a man at least some freedom of choice so that he can choose to be good. In an uncontrolled context, a strong man may be able to kill a weak man, but if the strong man knows he has that aspect of control over the weak man, that fact on its own can satisfy his urge for dominance and let him be more honest and cooperative with the weak man than he would be in the controlled scenario, where he could decide to manipulate passive-aggressively. It still remains a question whether the damage from passive aggression and lack of spiritual harmony, which results from enforced society, is a greater hindrance than murders resulting from inconsiderate strongmen in a free society. That is a complex topic to be covered elsewhere, and will be affected by many other factors. The point is that contrasts of good and bad cannot be completely avoided. They can only be suppressed and transformed, as in the example I mentioned. And I would argue, people would have a more harmonious outlook on life if they were aware of this. It seems there are too many cases of people acting in the short term as if a certain behavior or trait must be completely eliminated, and then finding themselves in a position where they have no choice left or no more potential to improve. It is almost a religion of contrast that a man must follow by recognizing what contrasts the meaning and pleasure in his life come from, and making sure these contrasts are not oppressed too much or eliminated. To apply that to my previous examples, you should not stay permanently in a hot environment if you want to enjoy a hot cup of tea in the winter. You should not be satiated all the time and lose the pleasure of a meal after a period of fasting. You should not be constantly surrounded by people if you don't want to lose the uniqueness of meeting someone new and special. You should not have sex so often to the point it is mundane. You should not work for a dominant, stagnant business if you enjoy new successes. And it is necessary to be aware of what life is like single and childless to be able to appreciate fully the gift of having a child.